With Six, I needed to create a unique aesthetic for the show, a unique aesthetic for the pop band that is the Six Wives of Henry VIII. It was a choice between going down a historical fabric route or down a contemporary fabric route, and I wanted to do a contemporary fabric route with the period shapes. So Six the Musical is about the Six Wives of Henry VIII, and it's about them being part of a pop group, and they're all fighting to be the leader of the band. The idea behind the show story-wise is who had the worst time with Henry VIII, and it's a great kind of pop-Tudor fusion musical concert extravaganza.
You're just so full of must think that I'm naive. I won't back down, won't, and no, I'll never leave. You must think that I'm crazy.
With costume design, you're predominantly designing for a character in a piece or in a musical or in a play, and you need to be able to create the costume that fits within the world of that story. You work a lot with the performer or the actor to try and find what works for them so that they feel confident and also they wear your design confidently. So in relation to Six, each of the queens has to feel really empowered in the silhouette that they're wearing. So this is the Catherine of Aragon costume. Catherine of Aragon was Henry VIII's first wife. She was Spanish and she was with Henry for a number of years, and she was famously divorced. It was important when designing Catherine of Aragon that I really referenced her Spanish and Catholic roots. So I really wanted to incorporate the colour of black and gold because it kind of signified that Catholic church ornamental vibe. And each queen has got their own inspiration from a pop artist. Catherine of Aragon has got a link to Beyoncé and she wears a lot of black and gold. So there was a link in terms of colour palette with her. When researching for the show, I spent a lot of time looking at historical references, so I looked a lot at portraiture, men's fashion and women's fashion at the time, objects as well, things like stained glass windows in churches. These are all things that fed into the costume design for Six, but also looking at the relationship of that with a kind of pop aesthetic.
Also, this is sort of slightly later than the actual era the show is set in, sort of like early 1600s, but there's still a lot of relevance with the Tudor sort of fashion here in relation to the Six design, isn't there? Like the riveted details on
the stud work. The neck piece here is very similar to Catherine of Aragon's choker.
Yeah.
You've got these quite enlarged in shoulders and the very the nipped in waist, and then the kind of exaggerated hip peplum. And do you know what? The free underarm.
Oh yeah, gusset movement.
Oh look, there's the lattice work here. Kind of the crisscross nature of the armour has a great link to Six.
And then the shape on that waist where it sort of comes in quite tight and then kicks back out again.
Yeah.
You've got sort of the cutouts, haven't you, which sort of evolved then into the idea of the vac revealing the holographic underneath on the stomacher sections. It's funny actually looking at these again, so you did so much research at the time that we talked about. I'd forgotten how geometric and graphic actually this era was, particularly when it comes to sort of the armour.
The grid work, as you say, is just so key for Six. I love this.
There's some really great colours in this one.
This is really good actually because I spent quite a lot of time looking at a lot of stained glass windows and architecture, as you know. The really brilliant thing about it is the use of black with colour, and a lot of the colours from the show have really I think I've basically derived them from these stained glass windows. So you've got really vivid golds in there, you've got those really rich reds. But I just think it's amazing seeing all the colours together, which again was a really amazing reference for Six because it's about seeing how they all interact with each other. And obviously that's why, we've got everyone having their own defining tone and colour in the show.
And shape as well, that kind of just echoes their elements of their character or their style.
I love a good ruff.
Well, we do like a ruff in Six, don't we?
It's a slightly later shape, isn't it? It's not Tudor, but it's more Elizabethan. But I quite like the ruffs that we have in Six because they're a homage to that era, but they're still made with contemporary fabrics. So you have that kind of contemporary spin on it. I really want to show you this cameo. When I looked at the Six Wives originally, I obviously research a lot of the portraiture that existed of them. But the Anne of Cleves one is really interesting for me because, again, it was a real insight to the sort of fashion that she wore.
And of course, we've only really got from that era sort of portraiture to capture, you know, there's no photography from that era, and so really all of the detail is within those images. And obviously it's quite appropriate looking at the portrait of Anne of Cleves with its reference within the song and the show that, you know, Henry didn't like her portrait, or she didn't look like her portrait when she arrived. So it's particularly relevant and ironic in a way.
I tend to start with a feeling or a mood. So that might be through colour, or it might be through historical research, it might be through contemporary research, but I tend to kind of like amalgamate all of them together. And then from there I'll tend to like start drawing on the page and exploring things like silhouette. And then when you put them all together, you start to see nice links, but also ways in which you can maybe start breaking the mould of what has been. So definitely in relation to Six, that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to take these things like these square necklines and really like take it to a different place, you know, take it to a 21st century situation. The mood is kind of created through the research and also then through the decision to try and shake things up and be influenced by history, but like twist it and it can become something else. I really wanted to include a lot of Tudor references. So there's the Tudor square neckline with the stomacher front. There's the kind of the 4-part peplum skirt, which is a reference to the shapes of the time as well. And there's also the idea of lacing, like corsetry, with the lattice work and with the lacing on the arm. And then the cutout detailing that she has is again an echo of the stained glass windows of the time, and the studs all over the costume reference the kind of royal adornments they had on their robes and on their dress. It was really important for me that I could find fabrics that had a really brilliant quality on stage. So they had a really great relationship with the lighting, and they had an iridescence and a kind of cosmic feeling, and also a really like empowering feeling as well.
So the sort of production process for a costume supervisor is to begin with a design. So a designer like Gabby will give me the designs. I will then go out fabric sourcing, bring in samples. We'll then have conversations about what fabrics may work practically and creatively. Although it's technically a Tudor show, it is a pop period hybrid, which means that we are trying to sort of merge together two different styles. So although a lot of the shapes of the costume are period, a lot of the fabrics we wanted were unconventional. One of the key fabrics is what we call the vac form, which is a formed PVC that has a textural quality to it. So there's a variety of stud trim and detailing that features on the Aragon costume. Predominantly this is kick press detailing, which is essentially a machine that is fed by hand with elastic or grosgrain to then have the studs with little rivets kicked through to create this linear detailing. Whereas these studs that are on the stomacher and the peplum sections, these are kick pressed through the top layer of vac and holographic, again using a similar process. And some of the other studs like the spike trim is a trim that comes pre-made on a large mesh that's then trimmed to size and then hand stitched and glued to the costume. So a costume like Aragon could be worked on by as many as 4 different people, depending on which process they're working on, whether that's the cutting out. This fabric here, the vac is cut out by hand using a scalpel blade. So one person may work on that whilst another person is then kick pressing the stud trim. Generally, when we do a full cast change, there can be up to 20 or 30 different makers working across the entire show. So it's quite a big process, including dyers, makers, crystal embellishers and milliners.
So the challenging nature of the costumes is, of course, making them remain sculptural, but also they need to be worn and they need to be moved in and danced in quite heavily. So it was really important to ensure that the performer could have that freedom of movement and breathability whilst also wearing something that was almost like, you know, a moving sculpture. The mic loop is where the cast put their mics when they don't need them when they're dancing, because there's no mic stands on stage. So it was really important to make sure that it also blended into the costume design well. So we're now going to look at the back. The stomacher is echoed with the back panel, which is a continuation of the cutouts. The peplum continues and meets at the centre back, and the segments of the peplum are divided by the stud trim. And then underlying the sleeve, we've got sequin, this gold sequin, and it's also got a holographic finish as well, which matches the foil nicely. Each of the sleeve tabs is outlined with gold leather binding, and the belt is also covered with the spikes that also are on the shoulders as well. I'm really, really proud that the V&A have decided to acquire the Catherine of Aragon costume from Six, not just from a design perspective, but from a costume team perspective. We've worked so hard to get the design to where it is now, so it feels like a brilliant achievement for the entire team, and it is like a lifelong dream. It's amazing.